Hey guys, so I wanted to do another tutorial on masking and some keying and that kind of stuff. You can see I'm in half res mode because I prefer to work most of my stuff that way. If we look at full res, we can see that this is a 3K file, which is oftentimes can be a little bit too heavy to work with. You know, if you're doing a bunch of keying and maybe effects work and some cleanup and that kind of thing. So I tend to work in a proxy mode, which would be half res. And again, just to set that up, if we didn't originally generate proxies in Flame, or if material is coming from someplace else, you want to make sure that you're generating those proxies here. So let's go ahead and go to Setup, Settings, Edit, and Confirm. This will take us into the setup for network rendering, and we want to make sure that local proxy is on. This will enable us to generate local proxies within Lustre. If we had proxy rendering on, this would also enable us to generate half-res proxies that can be used back in Flame. Sometimes you could also use them just for generating half-res proxies that you can play back within Lustre just to speed things along and then do your final full resolution grade at the end. But we're not going to turn that on right now. We're going to hit Save Project and then Exit. And in this case, I've already generated the proxy. But just to show you how we did it again, I'm going to hit Alt F9, which expands all the shots out, including head and tail. So we make sure we generate proxies for all that. We'll go into Render, and then Generate Proxy Options. In this case, if we were just to generate proxies for this one shot, we could right-click it, again hit Alt F9, and that would just show us this single shot by itself. We can then go in and generate a proxy for this shot. You can see it goes back into its raw settings, and we're actually generating the proxy. So you can see we now have a proxy for the half resolution of this image. So we're going to work on this image a little bit, and let's go back and look at exactly where we started out. And I'm just going to select in my Mary grade just a clean grade, and this is the raw settings for the shot. Again, a lot of times when I'm working, I'll want to see what the LUT will do to the shot just to see how it affects the shot, and if it takes me to a place that's a better starting point. So let's go to Effects, Color Transform, Browse, and we're going to select the camera that this was shot with, which was the Arri Alexa, and we're going to convert it to HD video. Let's import that, and you can see immediately we're in a much better starting point. So in this case, we could work directly with the LUT, and this would give us a good place to start. Another interesting feature of working with a LUT when it is as an effect is that I can use it as a secondary mask. So perhaps if there was a need, you had some special LUT to affect part of the image and not all of it, you could use masking in here. All right, so that's actually what I've got saved in my first bin in my Mary grade. So I'm going to double press that, and you can see that just turns that color transform on, and we get the exact same setup. But I'm not going to do that for this one shot in particular. Let's go ahead and I'm going to recall where I left this off from setting just a straightforward initial grade with a little bit of vignetting applied. So we're going to double click this, go into color, and you can see I've actually got 4 different secondaries set up. We can look at I, which would tell us exactly what we've done in our input, where we've adjusted balance, we've added saturation, and in our curves, we've adjusted the curve, the luminance curve, to get us in a little bit of better starting point. All right, let's go back to the output, and you can see that we've added, if we select secondary, go to secondaries and show, we've added a vignette. So we created a circular pattern, an oval pattern, and we've adjusted the outside of that pattern and reduced the gamma and the gain in order to drop the interest from the outside towards the inside. I did an additional one right here, the path where the girl slides along, to more further the interest in the center. Okay, you can see if we go to the inside grading, we kicked up the center a little bit. So we started here, which is roughly where the LUT put us, and then we ended up here, which is a little bit more highlighting the central interest of the image, hopefully to give it a little bit more pop. Let's go a little bit further, and I'm going to add a secondary to 5, and just to show you a little bit about how I normally work. I usually keep the first 4 secondaries for overall image-oriented stuff. The next 4 secondaries for flesh tones and working on those areas. And the third, perhaps for vignettes like we're looking at here. Okay? So in the 5th secondary, I'm going to go ahead and clean this one out. And normally what I'll do is I'll keep a secondary clean in each one of the 4 different groupings so that I can just hit Shift and then copy all the parameters over to a secondary in order to clean it out, which is what I've just done here. So we're going to look at a little bit of tracking now. Now the girl's flesh tones are very similar to other areas of the image. The different woods, the background color. So chances are we're going to have to do a little bit of masking in order to make adjustments on her skin, on her face in particular, in order to differentiate them from the background. So let's go ahead and first we're going to turn this on. We're going to create a mask of her head, just like this, for tracking purposes only. So starting there, I'm going to go ahead and track her face across the screen. And what this does is this sets me up with a single tracker that I can then add other masks to in order to have a starting point, and then I can refine those other masks for position. So we'll go in, and by hitting the tilde key, it takes us into the schematic. We'll select that original mask that we just created and hit Control H to hide it. That way, it's not getting in our way as far as when we're looking at other masking and setting individual masks up. Okay, we'll go back in and create a new mask just for the areas of her skin that we might want to adjust. Now I've created points on this mask, and by hitting the A key or the Add Points key, I can add new points. And by hitting the D key, I can delete points. Okay? So the next thing we want to do is tie this mask into that track we just did. Again, hitting the tilde key, we're going to take the original tracker and we're going to draw a line from that one to the new axis. You can see it did shift the tracker a little bit. Sometimes that does happen. And we're going to just move it back into place. I'm going to turn on the AT button here, which will help to smooth out the transitions between the different vertices. Now we see that as we're moving through here, it's following fairly closely because of that tracker we just created. All right, so let's go back in, turn on Auto Key, and now we can just make some adjustments when the mask itself gets a little bit out of place. Selecting all the vertices in that way, or selecting individual vertices with Auto Key on, we can then make changes along that path pretty quickly. Her face does turn away from the camera, so you get a little bit of a change in perspective there. But we can drag these points in pretty fast and be in pretty good shape. Okay? So now we have a mask that we can work with. The edge is probably too hard. We can blur that out. We can move the mask inward. We can move the mask outward. We can even do a variable mask where we can control different points on the mask in order to create different areas of softness. All right. And let's go back to this one. We're going to smooth this out a little bit. Again, hitting save, as I do all the time, just because after you've worked on something for a little bit of time, you want to make sure that you're continuing to save in case you get a crash. So we'll look at output again. And in this case, perhaps we want to also do some keying in her face just to give a little bit more control over the area that's being framed. Again, we can see the mask is off here a little bit. We might want to drag it over. So now let's look at keying. I'm going to turn auto key off because keying can be auto keyed. Let's select the box with the color and just drag along her face. And now you can see that we are keying her face mostly. We're picking up a little bit of this area next to her because it's a similar color. We can also look at hue, luminance, and saturation and see if that gives us a better key. Sometimes it does. It really depends. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to deselect this because we don't want that to change. Perhaps we want to increase the tolerance in this area. And then we might do a little bit of a blur just to prevent noise on the edges. So now you can see we're in fairly good shape as far as just dealing with the keying of her face. I'm going to pull this back a little bit, and you'll see that if I turn off the geometry, we're actually keying more than just her face. So this mask has become pretty important. It's taking care of a lot of the issues that we might have if we didn't use it. All right? So let's turn it back on. You can see, especially like in here, we're starting to pick up some similar areas. So in this case, I might just do a blur on it, but I might keep it a little bit inside the mask as opposed to on the outside. Now I'd use these quite often for things like beauty work or just adjusting flesh tones specifically regardless of the areas around them. So being that we're able to adjust this, we can maybe open up the gain on her face a little bit just to highlight a little bit of the interest. Now she feels like she's lit a little bit better perhaps. You can go in and add effects. For example, if we wanted to do a little bit of softening of her face, let's go ahead and go back to secondaries, turn off the mask, the showing of the mask. It's still there. But in effects, you can see that here we've blurred out our face a little bit. And perhaps we want to add a little bit of noise in just to add a little bit more of a grain feel in our face. So let's go ahead and save that. So if we select the previous setting we had here, you can see the difference. We've opened up her face, softened it a little bit, and that is now tracking along with her face. Okay. I hope this has helped a bit. There are many, many more things you can do with masks, combining them over multiple secondaries that can help differentiate different parts of the screen and enable you to do a much tighter correction on certain areas. Hope this helps, and I'll see you at the next one.